Dry River was the kind of town you didn't stumble into by accident. Tucked between two bluffs and a winding stretch of dust and bone. That morning, like every morning, the saloon creaked awake around 5 a.m. Not with music or boots or gunfire, but with Myrtle slamming her cast iron pans onto the stove like she was mad at them. At the heart of that kitchen was Myrtle May Crick, a woman with forearms like hams, a voice like cracked leather, and a wooden spoon she used more often as a weapon than a utensil. He sat on an overturned crate and ate with the concentration of a man avoiding a duel. Outside, the town began to stir, and two brothers who hadn't spoken in years yelled across the street about who cheated who in poker back in '79. She handed him the spoon. Stir. Peel him with this. She handed him a blade that looked like it had last been cleaned during a lightning storm. There was Jeb Langtry, Clara Wilde, and Hollis Black, the preacher turned poker player. Eli emerged from the kitchen with the first round of plates. Beans with pork, biscuits with lard, potatoes, fried, dark and crisp. You ever make cornbread, Myrtle? Only when the ghosts ask for it, she replied. He laughed, not knowing she meant it. What is it? He asked. Flavor, she said. He didn't ask again. Cards slapped against tables. Glasses clinked. Someone tuned the piano poorly and started a waltz that could have summoned demons or dancers depending on the mood. That night, Myrtle passed him a biscuit with a touch of molasses drizzled on top. For the work, she said. He leaned back against the crate, the spoon still warm in his hand, and thought, maybe this town wasn't so bad after all. By morning the storm had arrived. It didn't creep in with gentle drops or polite thunder. It slammed into Dry River like it had a score to settle. Rain pelted the crooked roof of the saloon, thunder snapped across the bluffs like the crack of a rifle, and mud swallowed the town's only road in thick brown waves. Inside the saloon, it smelled like wet leather, wood smoke, and strong coffee. Myrtle May Crick was already 3 steps ahead of the weather. She'd risen before dawn, started her bean pot, rubbed salt pork with a bit of the old brown spice she rarely used, and sliced onions so thin they could pass through sunlight. Her boots slapped against the floorboards as she worked, and her sleeves were rolled up high enough to show a faded burn scar shaped like the state of Texas. Eli was at her side, bleary-eyed, clutching a potato in one hand and a peeler in the other. Storm's good, she said, checking the window. Keeps folks inside. Hungry folks. As if on cue, the saloon door banged open with a gust of wind, and 4 strangers stepped inside, soaked and steaming. They didn't say much, just peeled off their coats and slapped their hats against their legs like they were dusting off memories. The tallest of them had a scar running down one cheek like a crooked river. Another wore a red scarf around his neck that looked more decorative than practical. The other 2 didn't talk, but their eyes moved in sync, scanning the room with the sharp, quiet focus of men who'd learned not to blink when danger walked. And Tom, the barkeep, gave them the kind of welcome that came with unasked questions. Coffee, the tall one nodded. Hot and black. Only way we got it. Eli watched them from behind the kitchen curtain, eyes wide. Outlaws, he whispered. Maybe, Myrtle said. Or maybe just hungry. What's the difference? Myrtle cracked an egg into a skillet with one hand and picked up her spoon with the other. Depends if they pay. She turned back to the stove, where salt pork was frying in a haze of smoke. The stew pot simmered nearby, filled with the leftovers of yesterday's stew and today's ambition. She added a splash of something dark and stirred, until the whole room smelled like adventure and a hint of regret. Eli helped ladle beans into cracked bowls, placing biscuits beside them like sacred offerings. The tall man with the scar took a bite, paused, and looked over toward the kitchen. Who's cooking back there? He called. Myrtle pushed through the curtain and stood in the doorway, hands on her hips. I am. You allergic to flavor? The saloon laughed, a short dry chorus that cut through the storm. The man grinned. Best damn beans I've had since Amarillo. That's because Amarillo's beans are boiled lies, she said. Eat up. They did. The rain kept falling. Thunder boomed again, and someone lit the first cigar of the morning. By midday, half the town was in the saloon. Farmers, gamblers, a couple of cowhands, too soaked to care about dignity. The poker table was full. The piano was silent wet. Keys and the floor was streaked with mud. Eli worked like a boy possessed, refilling coffee, ferrying plates, and learning 100 small lessons Myrtle never said out loud, where to stand. So, you didn't get knocked over. Which spoons served faster? Which mugs leaked? She never praised him, but every time she handed him a new task, he grinned like she'd given him a piece of gold. That afternoon, she handed him a pouch. "Cornmeal," she said. "Time to make bread." Eli blinked. "You're letting me make the cornbread? You mess it up, we feed it to Tom. He's got no taste." From behind the bar, Tom hollered, "I heard that." Myrtle didn't smile, but her shoulders relaxed. Eli took the cornmeal like it was treasure. The recipe was simple. Cornmeal, water, a pinch of salt, no eggs today too, few left. He mixed it carefully, remembering the consistency Myrtle had shown him. He poured the batter into a skillet and slid it into the edge of the fire. Not too hot, not too close. "Now we wait," Myrtle said, lighting a stub of tobacco. He sat down beside her. The saloon hummed with noise. Men telling tall tales. Women laughing with wine. The low hum of poker chips slapping against wood. Someone passed around a harmonica and played a few notes of a hymn until he forgot the words and switched to a gambling tune. Eli leaned back against a flour sack. "Think I'll ever be a good cook?" he asked. Myrtle chewed her tobacco and stared. "Into the stew pot, cookin's easy," she said. "Takes heat, timing, and a strong stomach. What's hard is feeding people when they ain't just hungry, they're hollow." "Hollow," she nodded. "Some folks eat to live. Some eat to remember. Some eat to forget. And some eat because it's the only time they feel human." The cornbread started to brown at the edges. Eli leaned forward to check it. Myrtle handed him a knife. "Cut it clean," she said. "Don't saw. Respect the bread." He did. The slices steamed, golden and crumbly. Myrtle pulled out a jar of molasses and drizzled it over one. She handed it to a woman near the bar who'd been crying quietly for an hour. "Eat that," Myrtle said. "Then tell me if you still feel like the world's ending." The woman blinked, took a bite, didn't cry again. Outside, the storm broke. Rain turned to drizzle, and the sky lightened like someone was lifting a lid. The road out of town remained a river of mud. But the worst had passed. Eli thought they might get an hour of peace. That's when the man in the red scarf stood up. He hadn't touched his food. His coffee sat cold and full. His hand now rested near his belt. "You been to Yuma?" he asked the tall man with the scar. The tall man looked up from his beans. "No. You're lying." The room quieted. Tom stopped cleaning a glass. Myrtle stopped stirring. Eli froze, his hand on a pot handle. "Don't start," the scarred man said. The red scarf man smiled. "You owe me from 2 winters back. Stole a horse. Left me with coyotes." The scarred man stood slowly. "I left you alive, which was your mistake." Myrtle didn't shout. She didn't panic. She just walked out from the kitchen and set a biscuit between them. "Eat that first," she said. Neither moved. "It's warm," she added. "Won't be in a minute." The man in the red scarf chuckled. "You always feed men before a fight." "Sometimes," she said. "Other times, I make sure the stew don't get blood in it." The tension broke just slightly. Someone snorted. The scarfed man sat back down, chewing the edge of the biscuit. The other sat too, eyes still locked. "I ain't forgetting," he said. "Don't," said the other. The moment passed. Barely Eli let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. That night, Myrtle made coffee strong enough to take the shine off bullets. The stew lasted longer than expected. No one died. No one got shot. And the molasses ran out just after midnight. Eli scrubbed the pots in silence. His hands were raw, but his grin was unshakable. Myrtle leaned against the wall, eyes half closed. "Not bad for a storm day," she said. "Not bad for any day," he replied. She nodded. "Tomorrow," she said, "we teach you how to slice onions without crying." He laughed. "You gonna show me the trick?" "Nope," she said. "You're Just gonna cry faster. Dry River didn't sleep so much as it paused. The storm had left behind wet boots, swollen doors, and a trail of hoofprints that disappeared into the morning mist. Outside, the dirt road steamed like it was exhaling. Inside, the saloon was quiet, except for Myrtle's knife against the cutting board and the occasional creak of Eli shifting on his feet. "Keep your thumb tucked," Myrtle muttered. "Else you'll be staring stew with half a hand." Eli adjusted his grip. He was learning. Fast. Potatoes no longer slipped from his fingers, and onions no longer sent him stumbling away in tears. Today he was slicing onions into perfect weeping coins for stew. Myrtle, meanwhile, was silent, not in her usual gruff, busy way, but silent like someone who knew something was coming. Tom noticed it too. "She's quiet." He whispered to Eli while cleaning glasses. "She's always quiet." "No," Tom said, narrowing his eyes toward the kitchen. "This is the before-a-storm kind of quiet." The bell above the saloon door jingled. Eli looked up to see a man in a black duster step inside. He wore no hat, no spurs, and no badge, but he moved like a lawman or a ghost confidant, like he didn't expect anyone to stop him. He didn't shake off the dust or wipe his boots. He walked straight to the bar and said 2 words, "Myrtle, crick." Myrtle didn't come out right. Away. She finished chopping, wiped her hands, then stepped through the kitchen door. She didn't smile, neither did he. "Well," she said, "didn't think you were still breathin'." "I am," he replied. "Not here for long." Eli stood. "Frozen," Eli, Myrtle said, not looking at him. "Go check the firewood. We have enough firewood." "Check it again." He went from the woodpile behind the saloon. He could still hear bits of their conversation. Came through Yuma. "Man, they're still looking for you. Let him look. You owe a debt. I paid it. With blood. With beans." "Silence, Dant, then." The man's voice again, softer now. "You were always good at feeding hungry men, even if it meant starving yourself." Eli dropped a log. When he came back inside, the man in the duster was gone. Myrtle was at the stove, stirring as if nothing had happened. "What was that about?" he asked. "Old stew," she said. "Reheated one too many times." That afternoon, Myrtle made chili. She only did that when she needed to think. The recipe wasn't written down. It lived in her bones. She roasted dried chilies in a skillet until the air turned sharp and smoky, then crushed them with salt and fat until the mixture was red as anger and thick as a secret. Into the pot went onions, beans, meat from a rabbit Eli hadn't seen arrive, and the mysterious spice from the back shelf she rarely touched. "What's that one called?" he asked. "Memory." He didn't press further. When the chili hit the tables, even Tom looked surprised. It was spicier than Myrtle's usual fare. Not dangerous, but close enough to the line to make you sip your whiskey slower. "You trying to kill us?" Clara Wilde said, between bites. "Just mackin', sure you're alive," Myrtle replied. But her eyes kept drifting to the window, watching that night. A note appeared on the back door. It wasn't signed, just a scrap of brown paper pinned to the wood with a paring knife. It read, "You've got until sundown tomorrow. Then we collect." Eli found it first. Myrtle didn't react when he showed her, just pulled the knife from the door, folded the note and dropped it into the fire. "Should we tell the sheriff?" he asked. "We don't have one," Tom said from the corner. "Last one rode out after someone put a rattlesnake in his boot." "Should we leave?" Myrtle shook her head. Not yet. She didn't sleep that night. Neither did Eli. Instead, she taught him how to sharpen knives. They sat at the back table with a whetstone, working in silence. "You keep the blade honest," she said, "even when the world ain't." Eli nodded, dragging the knife slowly down the stone. "Why'd they leave a note?" "Because cowards write threats. Men with real business don't write at all." He looked up. "Who are they?" "People who forgot they ate my food once." That night, no one came for dinner. It was as if the town knew something was coming. Even the piano stayed quiet. The next morning, Myrtle made cornbread. 2 batches. "Why 2? Eli asked. "1 for the living," she said. "1 for whoever walks in tonight." Tom loaded his shotgun. "We ready for this?" Myrtle didn't answer. By noon, the wind had changed. The road was dry again, but the sky held a strange stillness. Like a breath waiting to be exhaled, Eli stood near the door, wiping the same glass 3 times. The man in the black duster returned. He didn't knock. He entered the kitchen, tipped his head to Myrtle, and placed something on the table. A silver coin, old and worn. "I'm not here to stop them," he said, "only to warn you." "Then say what you came to say." "They'll be here at sundown. 3 of them, all armed. Not lawmen, not bandits either. Just ghosts. I've fed ghosts before. They remember, and they're hungry." Myrtle picked up the coin. "Then they'll eat. One way or another." The saloon was clean. To clean. Eli had scrubbed the floors until the boards looked like bone. Tom had polished every glass, lined them up in rows that reflected the dying light like mirrors. Myrtle rearranged the chairs, checked the cutlery, and stirred a pot of stew like it held her future. The silence was thick. No customers today. Even the regulars had kept their distance. "They know," Myrtle said. "Know what?" Eli asked. "That the dead don't eat. But they still come for supper." He didn't understand, but he nodded anyway. The stew she was cooking smelled different than usual. Deeper, richer. There were chunks of meat that looked too fresh to be salted, and a swirl of something dark floating just below the surface. Her spice jar was nearly empty now. "What's in it?" he asked quietly. "Everything I've got left." Myrtle was wearing her best apron, the white one with the blue stitching. She'd even brushed her hair and tied it back with a scrap of red cloth, the kind a mother might wear to greet guests or say goodbye to a son. The clock ticked toward 6. Eli stacked the last of the cornbread. Biscuits steamed beneath a linen cloth. The molasses had been gently warmed, sitting in a chipped porcelain bowl like a promise. "They might not even show," Tom said, cocking his shotgun. "They'll show," Myrtle replied, "at 6:23. They did. 3 riders. They came slow, like the horses knew what kind of place they were approaching. No dust, no thunder, just the quiet tread of hooves on hard ground. As they dismounted, Eli noticed their clothes were worn but clean, their hats low, guns tied down. They walked into the saloon like they'd been there before. Myrtle didn't greet them. She didn't need to. They sat at the corner table, the one by the window. The table where no one ever sat, unless they were waiting for something that might not come. Eli approached, holding the pot of stew like it was holy. The men didn't speak. He filled their bowls. One had a scar on his neck. Another had fingers missing. The third had eyes like flint-sharp gray, and watching everything, they began to eat. Slowly, Myrtle watched them from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, still using juniper berries. The one with the scar said, "They keep the bitterness down." Myrtle replied, "The bitterness is the only part I trust," said the man with the gray eyes. Eli hovered nearby, uncertain. "No need to linger, boy," said the man with the missing fingers. "We ain't here for you." Myrtle stepped forward then. "Then why are you here?" The man with the gray eyes answered, "Because debts were made in this room. Debts not paid in coin. You ate here, slept in my cellar, hid from men who would have gutted you in the street. And you kept our bellies full," said the man with the scar. "But not our names. You told stories to cover us, told the town we were miners or drifters." "I kept you alive," Myrtle said. "Exactly," said the man with the missing fingers, tapping his bowl. "And now we're back to die." Eli's stomach turned. He looked at Myrtle. Her face didn't change. "You could have stayed gone," she said. "No one asked you back. But we never left, Myrtle. Not really. You don't cook food like that unless you've buried a few men." Myrtle picked up the molasses bowl and walked over to their table. She poured a thin drizzle onto each man's biscuit. "There," she said. "One sweet thing. In case tonight's the last." They ate in silence after that, and Eli swore he saw one of them smile. Outside, the sky darkened to a bruise. The wind picked up, and still they sat, empty bowls and full guns at their sides. Tom stood behind the bar, gripping the shotgun like a Nervous prayer. Eli cleared their dishes. Hands shaking, Myrtle poured coffee. No one drank it. Finally, the gried man spoke. "Did you think we came to kill you?" "No," Myrtle said. "I thought you came to ask." "Ask what?" "If I ever forgave you." He nodded. "Did you?" "No," she said. "But I fed you anyway." The man leaned back in his chair, looked around the room like he was seeing it for the first time. The warped floors, the broken piano, the smell of molasses and smoke and meat. "I remember when this place had blood in the floorboards." "It still does," Myrtle replied. Eli swallowed hard. "Who are they?" She didn't answer, but one of the men did. "We're what's left," he said. "Of a war, a robbery, a night that got out of hand." "We ran," said the one with the missing fingers, "and she didn't." Eli stared at Myrtle. "You were part of it." She didn't look away. "No, but I cleaned it up." The man with the scar pushed something across the table. A folded piece of cloth. Eli stepped closer. It was a kerchief, red, torn. "My brother wore this," Myrtle said quietly. "We know," the gried man said. "We didn't mean for it to happen, but it did." Silence again. The kind that stretches across years. The kind that tastes like gunpowder. Finally, Myrtle said, "You done?" The man nodded. "We came to pay respect. You gave us food. We took more than we ever returned. Then leave." They stood. Eli backed up, heart pounding. The gried man stepped to Myrtle, pulled a coin from his coat, and placed it gently on the counter, for the stew. She didn't touch it. They walked out into the night, slow as they came. No words, no gunshots, just the wind and the sound of horses receding into the dark. Tom let out a breath like he'd been holding it since Tuesday. Eli turned to Myrtle. "Who were they?" "Ghosts," she said. "Just not the dead kind." She picked up the coin. It was silver, real and old. She tossed it in the stew pot, where it hissed and sank like a bad memory. "Kitchen's still dirty," she said. Eli looked at the empty bowls, the quiet chairs, and the molasses cooling in the corner. Somehow, the place felt warmer. "Want me to start with the knives?" he asked. Myrtle gave him a small nod. "Start with the knives." Dry River awoke, like a hangover dry, sore, and slightly embarrassed about what it had let walk through town the night before. The saloon sat in silence. Dust settled where the strangers had sat. Their bowls were still in the sink. The red kerchief still hung over the back of a chair like a ghost, too stubborn to fade. Eli was already at work, sleeves rolled, stirring biscuit dough with aching arms and a mind full of questions. "Myrtle," he asked, "was any of that real?" She didn't answer at first. Then the food was. That was all she'd say. Tom didn't ask anything at all. He moved around like a man who'd seen enough and wasn't keen on adding more to the tally. He spent the morning fixing a broken bar stool, cleaning the rifle over his knee, and watching the street with the look of a man waiting for something worse than yesterday. Just before noon, a box arrived. It wasn't delivered by rider or rail. It was simply there sitting on the back steps, square as a coffin, stamped with wax and wrapped in twine. Eli brought it inside. "It's for you," he told Myrtle. "No," she said. "It's for the saloon." They opened it together. Inside were 3 items: a dried bouquet of desert sage and lavender, a long tin of dried chilies, and a bundle of faded letters bound with twine. "From the riders?" Eli asked. Myrtle nodded. "Or what's left of them." She took the chilies to the kitchen and threw the letters in the stove. No hesitation, the flames took them like kindling. Eli watched the ink curl and vanish, unread. "Weren't they important?" he asked. "They were done," she said. Then she tucked the dried bouquet into a whiskey bottle by the window, where it would catch the light. That night, Myrtle cooked something new. Not beans, not stew. Something else entirely. She rolled thin cuts of beef in cornmeal and dried herbs, fried them in bare fat until the crust turned golden and crisp. She roasted red chilies over flame and mashed them into paste with wild garlic. She even made fresh cornbread, not from the usual pan, but from an old skillet that hadn't left its hook in years. Eli watched with careful hands. "Who's it for?" he asked. Myrtle nodded toward the door. "Him." A man was standing outside. Not a rider, not a lawman, not one of the ghosts from before. He was older, dressed like a preacher, and not much cleaner than a drifter. His boots were cracked, and his hat looked borrowed, but he had kind eye soft, like river stones, and a cane that clicked like a metronome when he walked. He stepped inside and tipped his head to Myrtle. "I heard you were still cooking," he said. "And I heard you were still walking," she replied. Eli set the table. The man sat without invitation. He didn't touch his food right away. He looked around the saloon slowly, like he was remembering it from a dream. "I watched this place burn once," he said. Myrtle raised an eyebrow. "It never burned, not with fire, with guilt." Then he took a bite. His eyes closed. He chewed like he was praying, and when he swallowed, he opened his eyes and smiled. "You still cook like someone who remembers too much, and you still talk like someone who's been forgiven." The man laughed. "Maybe I have. Maybe not." Eli served the rest of the food. There was enough for 3. The man didn't ask who the third plate was for. He simply waited until Myrtle joined him, and they ate in silence like old friends, or enemies tired of fighting. When the meal was done, the man wiped his mouth and reached into his coat. He pulled out a pouch, soft brown, stitched with red thread, and placed it gently on the table. "This belongs to you." Myrtle opened it. Inside were bones, small, white, and polished smooth by time. Eli turned away. He didn't want to know what kind of bones they were. Myrtle touched one with a finger. "I never thought they'd come back." "They were never gone," the man said. Myrtle nodded, stood, and walked to the fireplace. She placed the pouch inside the coals like it was a cradle, and let it burn. The man didn't stay long. He stood, thanked Myrtle for the meal, and tipped his hat to Eli. "You got good hands, boy," he said. "But your eyes are still young. That'll change." Then he walked out, cane tapping, vanishing into the dark like smoke. The saloon was quiet again, but something had changed. Eli looked at Myrtle. She was washing the skillet. Slow, methodical. "You knew him." "I buried his brother." "Was that what this was about?" "No," she said. "This was about finishing something we started 20 years ago." Eli dried his hands. "What?" "Was in the pouch." Myrtle looked at him. Her eyes were steady. Regret. He didn't ask again. That night, the saloon was full. Clara Wilde returned with her parasol and her poker face. Doc Sandwell nursed his whiskey like it held the secret to immortality. Even Widow Harper came in, asking for the sweet biscuits she hadn't tasted since the war. Myrtle served them all. No one asked about the riders, or the preacher, or the scent of burnt paper in the fireplace. But when Myrtle brought out the cornbread, warm and golden, she smiled just a little. Eli smiled too, because for the first time in weeks, the saloon didn't feel like a place for ghosts. It felt like home. By midweek, the rhythm of the saloon returned. Poker chips clacked like insects. The piano wheezed back to life under Clara Wilde's painted fingers. Biscuits disappeared faster than Myrtle could bake them. And Eli was getting faster with the knife, the broom, the ladle, and with watching the door. Not for ghosts, not anymore. Now he watched for the kind of trouble that smiled first. On Thursday, it arrived. The man wore a clean shirt. That was the first warning sign. Nobody came into Dry River wearing starched linen unless they were selling something or stealing it. He had smooth hands, trimmed nails, and hair that was too neat to belong to a cowboy. His boots were polished. His voice even more so. "Afternoon," he said, removing his hat as he stepped inside. "I hear you serve the best stew this side of the Red River." Tom glanced up from the bar. "Who told you that lie?" "Old friend in Messia." The man smiled, said if I wanted something warm and honest, to find the Crick woman. Myrtle emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands. Her apron was streaked with flour and something redder. She studied the man. "You bring coin or questions?" "Both," he said, taking a seat at the bar. She nodded at Eli bowl. Eli brought him stew, steaming and thick. He didn't speak. He watched out the man dipped his spoon, blew gently, and tasted it. He smiled again, better than I expected. That ain't a compliment, Myrtle replied. That's a setup. The man leaned in. What I mean is, it tastes like history, and you cook like someone who knows more than she lets on. You came here for a story. I came here for the truth. Myrtle turned her back and started slicing carrots. You'd get more truth from a fence post, the man chuckled. They told me you were clever. Tom leaned forward. Who's they? People who don't come here. The kind that read ledgers instead of trails. Eli stiffened. The man noticed. I'm not a lawman, if that's what you're worried about, he said. No badge, number, warrant, just questions, Myrtle muttered. And a proposal that earned him a sideways glance from Tom, a full stop from Eli, and a snort from Myrtle. Proposal, she said. I'm offering partnership. Better, Myrtle echoed, arching one brow without turning from her cutting board. The man's grin widened. A traveling exhibition. Stories from the frontier. Tales of resilience. Displays of tools, recipes, relics. Something to honor the grit of towns like this and women like you. He reached into his satchel and produced a folded pamphlet, cream-colored and embossed with gold leaf. Eli took it carefully. The title read, The American Grit Collection, Lives Forged in Dust and Fire. Myrtle didn't so much as glance at it. So, you want to take my life, she said. Slicing through a carrot with practiced speed, put it behind glass, and sell tickets. Not your life, Miss Crick, your legend. Eli watched Myrtle's knuckles tighten on the knife. Tom let out a quiet breath. That sounds like snake oil in a bodie. The man's charm didn't waver. Stories matter, he said. People out east crave the truth. Not the polished kind, the raw kind, the kind you can taste. You have that. This saloon has it. A whole town carved out of grit and stubbornness. Myrtle put the knife down and finally turned. Her voice was calm. And what exactly would you exhibit? My stew pot. Tom's shotgun. Eli's burned biscuits. The man chuckled. All of it, if you'll allow. We'd catalog recipes, gather oral history, maybe even recreate a few key events. Your brother's kerchief, the riders, the fire that never happened but almost did. People need reminders that survival is a kind of glory. Eli stared at him. Did you say recreate? The man nodded. We have actors, staging. We bring the past alive. Not everything that's dead should be brought back, Myrtle said. The man smiled gently, like he pitied her. History doesn't belong to those who lived it. It belongs to those who... Remember, Myrtle stepped closer. Let me tell you what's in that stew, she said. It's beans, salt pork, the last clean water in town, and the ache of 10 men who never came back from where they were sent. It's sorrow boiled down into something edible. And the only reason it doesn't kill you is because I learned to burn bitterness into flavor. She leaned over the bar, face inches from his. You want to make a show of that? The man didn't blink. Yes. Eli stepped back, heart thumping. Tom crossed his arms. You've got 5 seconds to leave, exhibition man. But Myrtle didn't move. Instead, she asked, what do I get? Eli turned toward her, stunned, waiter agreeing. No, she said. I'm negotiating. The man leaned forward. You'll get credit, full name, recognition, and half the share from any touring profits. Myrtle chuckled. I meant now. Today. What do I get if I don't throw you out? The man faltered. Myrtle stepped back behind the bar. If you want my story, you tell. Me yours first. Sit down. Eat again. But this time, you eat what I make and tell me the worst thing you've ever done, while it's still warm. The man hesitated, then slowly he nodded. Fair trade, he said. Deal. Myrtle vanished into the kitchen. The saloon was quiet, but tight with breath. Tom glanced at Eli. She's setting a trap. Eli whispered back, or baiting one. 10 minutes later, Myrtle returned with a plate. It wasn't stew this time. It was a slice of fried salt pork on a square of skillet cornbread. On top, a thin layer of molasses glistened like varnish. The man took one bite. He chewed, swallowed, set his fork down. "My name," he said softly, "is Hollis March. I used to run with a U.S. cavalry detachment stationed in Kansas. Back when the frontier was still bleeding." Tom's face darkened. Eli leaned closer. "We were told to clear land. Hostile territory, they called it. Only it was a village. Old folks, children, not a gun in sight. But orders were orders." He took another bite. "I didn't fire the first shot. I didn't fire the last. But I never stopped the ones between." Silence. No one moved. "I left the army a month later. Spent 10 years trying to outrun it." Myrtle nodded slowly. "Now you go," she said. "I told you, no, you go. Out." Hollis stood. I said you could eat and confess. You did both. We're even." Eli followed him to the door. As Hollis stepped into the sunlight, Eli asked quietly, "Did you really want to tell our story?" Hollis looked at him. Double quotes. "No, I wanted to steal it. Because I can't live with my own." Then he tipped his hat and walked away. Eli returned to the counter. Myrtle was scrubbing the skillet. Tom was watching the door again. "You're not going to forgive him?" Eli asked. "No," Myrtle said. "But you fed him." "I feed the hungry," she said. "Not because they deserve it, but because I can." The morning after Hollis March left Dry River, nothing strange happened, and that made Eli more uneasy than anything. No riders, no hidden boxes, no confessions over salted pork, just dust in the windows, flour on the counter, and Myrtle at the stove sleeves rolled, hair pinned back, face calm. Tom swept the porch with slow, deliberate strokes, stopping every few passes to watch the road. Clara Wilde tuned the piano in silence, the lid open like a patient in surgery. And Eli peeled potatoes. The silence stretched. "Miss Myrtle," he said finally, keeping his hands busy. "What do you do when someone tells you a story you don't want to hear?" "You write it down," she said, not looking up. "But what if it hurts? That's how you know it matters." He thought about that then. What if it's someone else's pain, not yours? Same rule. Eli stopped peeling. "What if it's neither?" Myrtle glanced at him then. "That's called gossip." He laughed, and some of the tension broke. The day unfolded slow and dry, like sun-baked leather. Regulars came and went. The widow, looking for molasses bread. A gambler, trying to pay in buttons. The gravedigger who never touched stew, but always asked for extra biscuits, around dusk. A stranger appeared. He wasn't strange like Hollis March, or the riders from before. No polished boots or haunted eyes. Just an old man in a patched coat, walking with a limp and carrying a wooden box with iron clasps. He set the box on the bar. "Is Myrtle Crick still cooking?" he asked. Myrtle turned from the hearth. "I was wondering when you'd come." Eli blinked. "You know him?" Myrtle nodded. "Only by reputation." The man didn't offer a name. Just sat down and ran a hand over the box like it was something alive. "Used to belong to my daughter," he said softly. Tom stood up straighter. "She'll live nearby." "She did," said the man, "before the fever took her." Eli moved closer, drawn by the quiet weight in the man's voice. The man opened the box. Inside were scraps, torn fabric, a cracked photograph, a child's spoon, a Bible with worn corners, and a stack of old letters tied with string, the color of dried blood. "She wrote to a man who never wrote back," the old man said. "He wore spurs and smelled like whiskey. Said he was going to start a new life. He left her with a cradle and a name that wasn't his." Myrtle stared at the box for a long time. "I remember her," she said. "You remember everyone," the man replied. Eli stared at the letters. "Why bring them here?" The old man looked at him, eyes like sanded wood. "Because if a story has nowhere to go, it rots, and she deserves better than rot." Myrtle came around the bar, placed a hand on the box, and closed it gently. "I'll keep them," she said. The man stood, slow as grief. "Thank you." He turned to Eli. "You ever learn how to bake sweet corn into a biscuit without making it taste like glue?" Eli nodded. "Takes lard and heat that's steady." The old man smiled. She'd have liked you. Then he left without taking anything. Not even supper, after he was gone. Myrtle carried the box to the back pantry, the one she locked every night, the one even Tom didn't open. "What's in the letters?" Eli asked. Myrtle didn't answer. She simply said, "Tomorrow, we bake for the dead." That night, Myrtle didn't sleep. Eli saw her candles still burning long after the poker players were gone, and in the kitchen, he smelled nutmeg, cornmeal, and something deeper like earth and iron. The next day, Myrtle didn't make stew. She made biscuits, dozens of them, round, golden, soft at the center, and crisp at the edge. Into the dough went chopped dried apples, toasted corn, and a whisper of pepper. She called them reminder biscuits. Eli helped carry trays to the bar. They didn't charge anyone. Whoever walked in got one. Whether they asked or not, people said thank you. Others didn't. A few just stood with the biscuit in their hand, like they'd forgotten how to eat. Myrtle never explained what they meant, but every time someone took a bite, she nodded, like she was counting by sunset. The biscuits were gone, every single one, and Myrtle locked the pantry. From the outside, with a key shaped like a coffin nail, the week after the biscuits, the air in Dry River shifted. Something in the wind changed, cooler, cleaner, like a thunderstorm, too polite to announce itself. Eli woke before dawn and stood by the saloon window, watching the sky turn pink over the hills. He didn't know why, but he felt like something was approaching. And around noon, something did. He was just a boy, maybe 17. Pale, freckled, sharp around the edges, in the way wild things are quiet, barefoot, and wrapped in a duster too big for his frame. He didn't speak as he entered. He didn't sit. He simply stood in the doorway, eyes wide like he'd stepped into a story and was trying to decide if he liked the ending. Tom was first to speak. "You lost, son." The boy shook his head. Myrtle leaned on the counter, wiping her hands. "You hungry?" The boy nodded. "Beans or stew?" she asked. He hesitated. "Beans," he said, barely above a whisper. Eli prepared a bowl, added a corner biscuit, and slid it across the bar. The boy took the bowl, but didn't eat. He stared into it like he was reading tea leaves. Myrtle frowned. Something wrong. "No, Mum." But still, he didn't eat. He sniffed the bowl, lifted the spoon, stirred slowly, then set it down. Again, Tom narrowed his eyes. "You sure you're hungry?" "I'm sure," said the boy, but nothing passed his lips. Eli leaned closer. "You allergic?" "No." "You sick?" "No." "What's your name then?" The boy's gaze flicked toward the window. "Lem." Myrtle tilted her head. "Just Lem. Used to be Lemuel. But no one says it right." She smiled. "Lem, it is." "Where?" "You from?" asked Eli. "Used to be from Nevada. Now I'm just from away." That was the last thing he said for the rest of the day. He didn't leave. He didn't eat. He just sat on the far end of the bar, hands folded in front of him, bowl untouched by nightfall. Clara Wilde tried to draw him into conversation. Nothing. Doc Sandwell tried to diagnose him from 20 feet away. "Looks haunted," he muttered. "Or homesick, or both." The saloon thinned out after sunset. Tom cleaned the guns. Myrtle scrubbed the counters. Eli rinsed the stew pot. Still Lem sat, motionless. Eli brought him tea. "Try this. Chamomile. Helps the stomach. Or the soul." The boy accepted it, sipped, set it down. "Good," he whispered, but he still didn't eat. Finally, as the candles burned low, Myrtle came around the counter and sat beside him. "You looking for someone?" she asked. Lem shook his head. "Running from someone." Another shake. "Then what do you want from us?" The boy turned, and for the first time, his eyes focused sharp, brown, clear as creek water. "I heard this was the last place he ate," Lem said. "Who?" "My brother." Myrtle's hand went still on the counter. Eli leaned forward. "What was his name?" "I don't know," Lem said. "But he wore a red kerchief and rode with the others. And he sent me a letter with just one word in it." "What word?" Myrtle asked. "Come," The room went quiet. Tom stood up. "Where's the letter now?" "Buried," Lem said. "Back where I found it." Myrtle placed a hand on the bar. "Did he say anything else?" The boy's jaw tensed. "He said the food would explain the rest." Myrtle stood. "Come with me." She led Lem through the swinging door into the kitchen. Eli started to follow, but Tom shook his head. "She's not cooking," Tom whispered. "She's teaching." An hour passed, no sounds came from the kitchen. When they emerged, Lem's cheeks were damp and flushed, and in his hands was a plate, a simple one, biscuit, honey, one slice of dried apple. He walked back to the bar, sat down, and ate every crumb. When he was done, he looked at Myrtle. "Thank you." Myrtle nodded, double quotes. "Tell your brother," she said quietly, "that we remember him." Lem left without another word. In the silence that followed, Eli turned to Myrtle. "What was that?" She didn't answer for a while. Then, a recipe passed between ghosts. Dry river rolled into July with heat like judgment. Dust lay thick on the window panes. Sweat slicked every collar, and even the poker players played slow. But inside the saloon, Myrtle kept the stove burning, always burning. Eli was chopping onions. When he found it, a slip of paper wedged behind the flour tin in the back pantry. The ink was smudged, but the handwriting was Myrtle's. He would have bet 3 biscuits on it. It wasn't a shopping list, it was a recipe. Pickled boar and burial biscuits. For after the last bullet, only if you mean it. MC Eli brought it. To Myrtle, "You drop this." She read it once, then folded it without a word, and tucked it into the pocket of her apron. "That recipe's not for you, but it's yours." "No, it belonged to someone else. I just survived it." Tom came. Through the door just then, squinting at the sun outside. "Stagecoach from Mesilla just turned north," he said. "No passengers, just a driver and a box." "A box?" Myrtle asked. Tom nodded. "Black, nailed shut, heavy." Myrtle stiffened. Eli saw the change in her shoulders. Like she'd picked up a burden without touching anything. "What's in it?" he asked. "Something buried," she said. That afternoon, she made stew, but not the usual kind. This stew had cinnamon and cloves and 2 spoonfuls of molasses, so dark it looked like ink. Eli tasted it and nearly choked. It was warm, sweet, and strange like nostalgia, cooked too long. "What is this?" he asked. "Memory," she said, "served hot. They didn't sell it. They didn't offer it. They just set out bowls in silence. Those who ate it said nothing. Those who refused, it didn't stay long." By sunset, Tom stood at the door, rifle resting against the frame. "You expecting trouble?" Eli asked. "Not trouble," Tom replied. "Just company." As the sky bruised into twilight, the box arrived. No horses, no driver, just a box, sitting in the middle of the main street, as if dropped by the wind. Tom approached first. Eli followed. The box wasn't nailed anymore. It was cracked open. Inside, a burnt skillet, a single white glove, and a folded newspaper from 1881. The headline read, "Crick Saloon Destroyed in Fire. All lost." Eli frowned. "But we're here." Tom didn't speak. Myrtle stepped out onto the porch, saw the box, and sighed. "They're reminding us," she said. "Who?" Eli asked. "The ones who never got their ending." She reached into the box and lifted the glove. "Help me, Eli. Help you." "What?" She turned to him. "We're going to make the last meal." He stared. "That recipe, the one you said wasn't for me. It's for them now," she said. "And I can't cook it alone." Eli swallowed hard. "Will it bring them back?" "No," Myrtle said. "But it might let them leave." That night, they cleared the saloon. No drinks, no piano, just the cooks. One skillet and silence. They cooked the pork slow, braised with whiskey, glazed with sorghum, added onions, cornmeal dumplings, and the rest of the recipe's haunted ingredients. It took hours when they plated it. The room felt colder. Tom locked the front door behind them. Clara Wilde stood by with a candle. The townsfolk came, one by one, no questions, just hands. reaching for a taste of something that didn't belong to this world anymore. And when the last bite was taken, a gust of wind blew through the saloon. Though no windows were open, the flame of Clara's candle danced, and the old clock above the bar struck once. Eli exhaled. What now? Myrtle untied her apron. Now, we write it down. Eli nodded slowly. The ink would never do it justice, but the story he knew was ready to be told.